All right, welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media, and my favorite episodes are the ones where we've got Kyle and Brianna that join to talk about books and books that we read and work together. And I got the large print, which I don't recommend next time because the book is really big. And did you get the large print too, Kyle?
I did.
You did? I got it.
I believe so.
I have the audio version.
Oh, nice. That's what I should have gotten. I definitely did not need my progressives for the large print book, and there was plenty of room in the margins for notes. But I think this has been the most interesting book that we've read to date. Probably because I had the most challenge personally with it. Right? It made me, I don't want to say feel bad, but it made me examine myself in a way that wasn't, you're perfect and you're wonderful. It showed some flaws and highlighted some flaws, and in a positive way. But I think it was a super good book. So curious initial reactions from you guys having finished it.
I'll go. Having read it, same thing. Like what came up with me being a wife and a mom and a business owner and a mentor, and like they talk a lot about like the doctor relationship. I was examining all of that. And then you kind of, when you read books like this, like, I don't know with you guys, but like I go back in with my husband and I start like therapizing him. Is that a word?
Works now.
It works.
Yeah, he has no idea what I'm talking about because he won't read the damn book.
That's a different podcast.
God, it would make our relationship so much easier if he would just he'd just read the books I'm reading. Yeah, that was my initial takeaways.
Yeah, I would agree. It was difficult, I think, for two reasons. One, same with you, both of you personally, realizing like where I'm really weak. It had a way of, because it's so clear on what is good communication, it just really narrowed down like, hey, I'm not good at this, So in a way, it's super helpful because I know now some really specific strategies to help in, like you said, Brianna, like all facets of life, like with my kids, with my wife, and especially with my team at our locations here, of how I can show up, especially like the middle chapters, which we can get into them a little bit, but there's essentially those three main conversation types. Mm-hmm. And the one conversation type is the how do you feel? And that's where I would say, would be my weakest. But the other aspect that was challenging too is just as Aaron and I were talking about before we started the video, is I found it just difficulty just as a practical level, like because the book had so much content, that it was kind of hard to find where I was in terms of what we were talking about. So it's one of those things where, I've been through it once, but I feel like I need to go back and probably reread some sections and try to, because I just finished it pretty recently, and I'm looking forward to this conversation about it to hear, how it resonated with you both and how you are applying it into your lives. But also I kind of want to go back and take some notes and really like make it more practical in my life, not just kind of pass through and move on, because I think it is that good of a book, that helpful.
Yeah, and listening to the audio side, like what I'll do is everybody's like, Brianna, when do you have time to do all this stuff? So I have a 20-minute drive to my office in the morning or home, and that's 2 days a week. And so I'll even like 5 minutes, if you have the 5 minutes on the audio too, like if you're getting ready in the morning or whatever it may be, those little things really do add up. So if you're not a reader or whatever, like I listen and then I have a notes thing for each book. And so that's like my takeaways. But we'll get to those later. But that's just some, as you get into books and reading, because I think it's really important for our colleagues to become readers. Mm-hmm. And not optometry books, not science, like these types of books is how you're going to fulfill your life and what your dreams are and be there for your patients. So just a little how we all read is very differently now, that there's so many options now to read. Maybe you guys can share when you find time too, because I feel like it's challenging, but you do have to put it in your schedule.
Yep. I was sharing with Kyle at the beginning. My cheat code. You guys old enough to remember Cliff Notes, right? Where you could buy their Spark Notes, right?
Yeah.
So the modern day Spark Notes, at least for me, is Blinkist. It's an app. I can't remember how much it costs, but it's a yearly subscription, pretty inexpensive, and they take whole books and summarize it. And so I'll listen to the Blinkist first, and you can get through that in half hour or so, where it summarizes the book, and then they have the notes version of it. And so I print off the notes version and read that, so I know what I'm going to be reading deeper in the book. So it kind of gives me that synopsis, right? Just to the point, the synopsis. And so that when I'm reading the book, and because Duhigg did a great job of storytelling, the hard part of storytelling is he would start the story and then stop the story. And then he wouldn't come back to the story till the end of the chapter. And my mind's stuck on like, what happened? And so now I wanted, it could help me follow all the way through. But that's my cheat sheet. And then I'll usually buy the book and listen to it because I like making handwritten notes. But sometimes my brain, processes better when I'm hearing, like I'm in the car and I can just let my mind wander. So
yeah, those are good insights there. I have kind of gone back and forth between listening and reading, just hardcover or soft cover books. And for a while, it kind of just depends upon the book. Like I like to listen, but most times if it's a book like this that I know I really need to digest, if I want to get through something like really quickly as a first pass, I like to listen to it. And then if it's worthy in my mind of like, hey, there's some things in here I really need to apply, then I'll buy the hard copy and I'll go through that. But for the most part, I like to have like a little 5x7 index card as my bookmark in all my books. And then I'll just write down big ideas on those index cards. And I try to limit like 1 or 2 index cards per book. And then at the end of that, I have a filing system through Evernote. So I have all the books I've ever read into I have an Evernote stack called the library. And then for each book has a notebook, and then I'll just take a picture of that index card and save it so that if something comes to mind, hey, I know I read something like that in that book, I can always remember kind of where it is or kind of the main idea. I'll go back and I know it's in my Evernote. I'll pull up that file and I'll be able to see that, and that'll jog my memory on that. So that's a process I've been using for about a decade or so on reading. Wow. It's been super helpful. But for me, it's like, same with you. It's commute times. It's the 15 to 20 minutes before work or after work or over lunch. It's never like, in my fantasy world, it's like 3 hours on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon with a giant cup of, really good coffee. But that has never happened in my life.
And it's but those never are always the before bed.
No.
Like I can never read one of these before bed because I'm just like,
for sure.
Out.
Yes. Although I like how you said, Kyle, like you guys, because your system is so detailed. I need a master class on just how
on
to
his
do that.
soap notes for books.
Like I've got a highlighter and a pen. You've got Evernotes.
You're ahead of me. I only have a pen, Aaron.
I kind of want to retire and become a librarian, to be quite honest with you. I would just love to be a librarian. So
yeah.
Soon, Kyle.
I don't think it pays as well.
Probably not, but I will tell you the nerd in me is fanboying right now because like that system just sounds amazing.
Right.
Let's jump into it. So the first, we talked about the 3 different conversations, and they were decision-making, emotional, and social conversations, and we'll hit them. The first one resonated really well out of the gate because it talked about a doctor was challenged because he was having conversations with his patients, and they were choosing just the opposite direction that he was trying to encourage them to go. And I don't necessarily think that I've had patients choose opposite, but I think compliance-wise, we get frustrated. And I used to take it super personal. And then I swung the far other way and said, well, if they want to just, not take care of themselves and go blind, that's on them and not on me. but I don't think either one of those attitudes is correct. And what was interesting is for the story from the book, like he really never asked the patients what they wanted out of their outcomes, right? It was a very transactional conversation. And as soon as I read that, seeing patients in clinic, I started my conversations walking in the room after introducing myself, basically saying, what do you want out of this? Like, what do you want during your time here? And because I can give that to you, quite frankly, from a practice management standpoint, it's amazing because somebody tells you what they want and you give it to them. You know, it's a 5-star visit, but just what do you want, right? Do you want to see better? Do you want to just me to tell you that you don't have glaucoma and you're fine? Do you want me to tell you you've got that nasty stigma thing and we'll fix it? Like, what do you want? And it changed the tone of the visits. I think because I've never been asked that from a doctor visit, right? It was really interesting how it changed, and sometimes they didn't know what they want, so I got to tell them. Sometimes they did tell me what they want, and it made it really easy because I could just focus on that one thing and, you know, shorten the visit time down and still make them happier than I would have otherwise.
I wonder, Aaron, like revenue pre-Supercommunicators and post-Supercommunicators, that would have been a really cool thing to see. Because I think as we're all getting into the very first part of the book is it says the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's happened. And I think we have those conversations all the time with patients where we think they're in it and they are like, you say one word and they're like hung up on the stigma, right? And you didn't address it. And then they will forget everything behind it. And so it's too many times where our back is to the patient or we're typing and not listening. I really, really understand that behind the slit lamp, or not just looking at eyes, like you're looking at a complete human. And it's really easy to forget that, I think, in our dark rooms. Mm-hmm. So honoring that relationship that's also what I think we've built our practice off of is listening. But we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, it was interesting. They talk about how it's not necessarily the words, but that connection, right? Are you on the same wavelength as them? And I started watching my teenage daughters. I can talk about them because they don't listen to this because Dad's a nerd. But when they're with their friends,
Aaron, for now, you're a nerd for now.
For now, when they're with their friends, they're all carbon copies of each other. Right? They laugh the same. The giggle is the same giggle. Right? They want so much to be like each other that they even have the word same. You know, somebody will say something same. And the rest of them all go same. Right? Like they want it. And I don't think it's a cognizant, like I'm trying to be like you, but that's how the group connects and feels together. And my one daughter, who was very much a tomboy, now her hair how she wears her hair is almost dependent on what her friends are doing when we get to the soccer field, right? Friends started braiding their hair. Now we got to have a braided hair because we just want to be part of a group. And I'm no different, right? I want to be part of the group. Shoot, we all showed up wearing black shirts today. Subconsciously, we all want to be part of the group.
Great. Love it.
But I thought it was really interesting how getting on that same page, and part of it was tactfully, if somebody's sitting cross trying to mimic their physical sense, their physical presence, but also even, laughing and having your tone similar to how they have their tones.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to insert a good quote here. It's on 22. It says, the importance of this insight that communication comes from connection and alignment. So like you could probably summarize the book as that, like communication comes from connection and alignment. It goes on, is so fundamental that it has become known as the matching principle. So he uses that phrase, that matching principle throughout the whole book. But the matching principle is the effective communication requires recognizing what kind of conversation is occurring and then matching each other. So, wouldn't you define, according to Charles Duhigg, wouldn't you define a supercommunicator as someone who essentially intuitively, probably not even like consciously, but just subconsciously or intuitively kind of sees what type of conversation they're in, or what's going on around them, and then is actually able to kind of be really nimble and flexible and then match, whether it's, one of the three types, which we can say, like, well, the first type is the kind of the practical conversation, or the what's this really about. The second one is the emotional, how do we feel type conversation. And then the third one is the social conversation. I think you mentioned that already, but, super communicator is one that kind of intuitively knows, can feel and sense what type of conversation they're in, and then aligns with that to connect. And that's the type of person that I think we probably all know that person, right? It's the type of person that we all want to talk to. We all want to have a conversation with. It's the type of person that we call for advice, to chat with, to hang out with, those types of things. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's interesting how alignment is such a key with that.
One key that I picked up too, Aaron, you kind of hit on it, was the laughter. So the story he tells is about the space program, where they're going to figure out who's going to like lose their shit in space and who's going to like stay on board the ship and do what needs to be done for the team. And it came down when he listened to 25 years, I think, of interviews to figure out who was going to make it and who didn't. It came down to genuine laughter. And so it'll be like you're at a dinner party and you say something and then it's like, haha, like nobody matches you. You shrink back, you shrink down, right? Versus if somebody like matches your laughter, you're excited about it. You're like, well, Aaron doesn't cry, but like cry laughing or something. And somebody doesn't match you, you're kind of like on to the next conversation. So we see that a lot at our meetings that we all go to, where you're gravitated to those people that are really matching your energy. And then the people that really suck your energy, you have to work. We've all been in those conversations where it's like the same basic conversation.
How's the weather? How's the practice? Yeah. Yep.
How many practices do you own? Like, it's just that's just exhausting for everybody in that conversation. So how can we, that's again, what I think this is a really good industry book for us together. Not only for our colleagues, but to better patient care.
I think so too. So I'm not one that naturally picks up on what kind of conversation we're having, especially at home, and especially with my wife. And after reading this, she was complaining about something or venting, and I immediately went into husband mode and started solving the problem. And that wasn't the right answer. So and she expressed it. And so now I've asked, said, look, can you just, like, what kind of conversation? Are you just going to vent? Because then I'll put on my venting listening hat and we'll just listen. Do you want me to solve the problem? But framing it at the very beginning, I probably need to work on being more in tune to what it is instead of just asking. But as soon as we get on that same page, it makes it a whole lot easier, because I don't feel like I'm disappointing her. She doesn't feel like I'm not listening to her. She's not being heard. So I started the same thing with my staff at the office when they come back, hey, Dr. Aaron, we need to talk. Cool. Like, are you venting? Do I just need to listen? Do we have a problem that we need to solve? What are we talking about first? And then we'll jump into it. But it's, I don't know if you guys have tried that as well, or if you're much better at just sensing the type of conversation you're about to have, but defining it at the beginning has been very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great. Go ahead, Brianna.
I think we said this back in our last recording, which has kind of led to this book, was what Aaron, you're saying is he does it. Everybody in a conversation wants to be heard, held, or hugged, or sometimes all three.
Yeah.
So the sooner you can get to what the conversation is about, the more successful it's going to be, and everybody's going to get what they were looking for from the conversation.
Yeah. So how do you find what that conversation is? Are you good at picking up on it? Do you look for cues? Are you as blunt as I am and just ask?
I'll be honest, I have a hard time too. Like I don't know if I'll even ask. Sometimes I can pick up on it. I would say the weakest for me, I will be able to discern usually if it's a more of a practical conversation, or a like identity social conversation. I feel like I'm more intuitive there, and I feel like I'm intuitive enough when it's a feelings based conversation. But I'll be honest, like that's where I know I have to work harder to be more. I forget where he said it, but he used the word generosity. That's where I tend to be pretty, I don't know if it's a word, ungenerous. So if I'm sensing that it is a feeling conversation, I it takes like I'll pick and choose the type of person, and this is obviously a fault of mine, but I will pick and choose the type of person that I'm willing to reciprocate that vulnerability, right? So if it's somebody that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, or somebody who maybe even a team member that I don't sense I should be vulnerable with, I won't offer up that vulnerability back to them, because one of the things that he recommended in the feelings-based conversation is like, hey, initiate with something like a deep question. And then once they respond, then you need to reciprocate that vulnerability to them. And that's how you kind of align. That's how you connect with that person. And like I said, that's what it was good for me personally, it made me realize, like, I do that, but I'm not very generous for the number of people that I do that with. I'm pretty choosy on who I'm willing to, even the part with that section about matching moods, how matching mood and energy is really important. I choose that as well. Like there's certain people that I'll match, and certain people that I just like subconsciously like feel more reserved around, or I won't match their energy because maybe I don't want, it's in a sense, it's almost manipulative. But that's just kind of that was helpful for me to see that, like, okay, I feel like I'm more comfortable with certain people on the team that I'll do that, and then others that don't. And as the leader of our culture, I got to match every time. Like, I got to bring the mood, I got to set the mood, bring the energy, and match it much more consistently with my team in order to communicate better with them.
Yep. I think the line that he used frequently in there, and I'm not sure if this is what you were referencing, but it says, ask about others' feelings and then share your own. So asking them and sharing back. And I struggle with that. I've got a good friend, Jessica, that I actually call when I have to have a hard conversation, usually in business settings. And I share what I'm going to do, and she laughs and says, no, Aaron, you're being a jerk. Like, here's a better way of skinning that cat. And one of the strategies she shared with me is something called feel, felt, found. And it's, listening to their feelings and acknowledging how they feel, not trying to defend, deflect, just, if they complain that something's too expensive or too onerous or whatever the case, just acknowledging their feelings. And then following up with yours. Well, when I was in a similar situation, I felt the same way, or I felt this. You can always find something to relate to. So it helps to validate and then share your own feelings back. But then because I don't like sitting in that emotional, crying or non-crying, conversation, hey, when I was there and I felt that, I found that when I did X, Y, Z, here's how I resolved the problem. Or here's how I addressed the situation. But it gave a structured framework so I didn't have to, feel like I was listening to crying or feel like I had to over-communicate and be overly vulnerable. But for me, at least, that framework has worked really well.
And Kyle, I think there was one part of it, too, that I wrote down. He said, we're all cognitively lazy. So there's no judgment on, not always wanting to show up in every conversation.
It's true.
And he did say something that kind of resonated, where it's like, where are you from? Are you married? Are you going to have, all those are cognitive lazy conversations or questions. And so he said every shallow question can become deep. So instead of asking somebody where they're from, you say, what's your favorite thing about the place that you're from? Right. And then that allows the conversation to open up, where it's just not these one-word answers, because obviously, as we're more connected than ever online, it's these short 10, 15, 20 word blurbs that we're all talking now. So it's like we're all talking in like Instagram tongue or something.
That is a great phrase.
Instagram tongue.
That is a great phrase. I love that.
So
Nice.
maybe that's part of this too, or in the doctor part of this too. When the doctor that I bought my practice from retired, we had all the patients fill out cards of how long they'd been seeing Dr. Garamizo, what they loved most about him. And he was a really good listener, and he was really good at communicating that back. And so I kind of got a peek behind the curtain on what they were looking for as he was retiring, and I would be taking on these patients, what they really loved about him. And that, I think, has really gone by the wayside in patient care because we have to see more patients than ever. I don't know about you guys, but like I turn into a pumpkin after like 19 patients because it's like you have to have these conversations way over. So it's how are you giving yourself the energy to have those conversations and to keep them going? And then sometimes it's like that patient essentially just needed a hug or like a tap on the like a pat on the shoulder. But we just like throw up on them all these things. So it's also just like taking a step back a second, letting them finish the conversation. I like, Aaron, what you said in the very beginning on how you've walked into every exam room now. That's great because now there's clarity.
Yeah, it makes a difference. And I think it also from you said we see all these patients. It feels like we have to do more now, right? And
they expect more now.
We think they expect more now, but we don't ever ask what they expect, right? And which is funny. And I know we're talking about supercommunicators. I'm going to jump into our real worlds for a little bit on, we call it a comprehensive exam, the VSP med exam, and they come in and we got glaucoma suspect and they're first time progressive, and they've got dry eyes, and then they've got diabetes, and we think we have to do it all right then. Right? Maybe all they want is a new pair of sunglasses because they're going on vacation. Right? Maybe they have their daughter's wedding coming up soon and they're tired of their eyes being red and they want to look good in the picture. Right? That's what's important to them. We can work on the other stuff later. And so having that, what are you expecting? What's the outcome? What does a good outcome look like for you? Helps us not have to try to be everything to everyone all the time. Helps them get what they want because we can have all these other conversations at the right time in the right place. We just need to align and get on the same page as quick as possible.
Yeah, it's almost like you've rethought the chief complaint in a way, and you've restructured it in a way that you're actually getting to the heart of why they're there and what their values are, and people are going to feel way more seen and heard and known by expressing things the way that you've kind of phrased it there. So that's good.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough with patients. I think it's even tougher with our staff. The patient is going to be gone in an hour. Right? They're going to be out the door in an hour. Hopefully they don't jump on Yelp, and if they do, it's a 5-star review and not a 1. But your staff.
Or those notorious 4-star reviews, like what would it have taken to get a 5?
I can't blame them too much because in my world, perfect 10's impossible. There's always room for improvement. But
you're a 4-star reviewer, Aaron?
No, not when it affects somebody else.
Oh my God, we just stop being friends.
No. Yeah, because the 4 stars, they never give you any like negative feedback. It's all positive, but you're left hanging. Like, well, what didn't make it a 5?
Yeah. That's when you want to call them up and be like, can we have a conversation? I've got a book for you to read. Right?
Yeah. So I want you to say, I want to tell you how that made me feel. And then you try to reciprocate, have them reciprocate the vulnerability, and then you can really break down the conversation there. That'd be good. I don't know if it'd work, but.
I don't even want to know if I want to get into those conversations.
I don't.
Some conversations I'm perfectly fine asking about the weather and moving on.
I'll be cognitive lazy there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Willingly.
With our staff, it's tougher because like the conversations don't end. They just get put on pause in between patients, right? They're back. Yeah. We're always trying to solve a problem. We're always working on something. It's really hard to consistently stay on the same page with them or them with me. because life gets in the way and patients get in the way. And I think one of the things reading the book brought back to my attention is when I talk to everybody and they bring up an issue, is going all the way back to everybody's here with good intent. Like, let's start with their intent. Let's start with their feelings. Y'all are skinning the cat completely different ways. Not that one's right or wrong. They're just different and they're clashing. But let's start with intent and try to build from there. And then let's look at what outcomes we want. Because I don't, at least for me, outcomes in business are critically important. Outcomes from conversations are important. Are we getting to a point where we can both agree and move on? So how have you addressed like staffing conversations through this? The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. Hey there, eye care professionals. Are you ready to elevate your patient's visual performance to the next level? Introducing Vision Edge Pro, the ultimate visual performance supplement. Vision Edge Pro is packed with mesozeaxanthin, lutein, and zeaxanthin in a precise 10-10-2 ratio. This powerful blend has been clinically shown to increase macular pigment density, enhancing key aspects of visual performance like contrast sensitivity and vision and glare. But that's not all. Vision Edge Pro also includes 300 milligrams of DHA and EPA, meeting the daily requirements for omega-3s as recognized by leading health organizations. This means your patients get comprehensive eye health support in one easy supplement. Whether they're driving at night, working on screens, or enjoying the great outdoors, Vision Edge Pro helps them see clearer and live better. So why wait? Recommend Vision Edge Pro to your patients today and help them achieve their best vision ever. Contact your local MacuHealth representative for more information, and to be sure to use code PODCAST2024, that's PODCAST 2024 at checkout on MacuHealth.com for special discounts. Vision Edge Pro, where clearer vision meets enhanced performance.
Go for it, Brianna.
Mine comes back to, I actually did this exercise. It was actually from another book, fitting that it's on book club. It was Bart Foster's book, Business Outside. And he has, at the back of his book, he has 50 words. And I did this also with my husband, but I did it with all my team members. So you start with 50 words, your 50 become 10, your 10 become 5, and your 5 become your 3, and your 3 top values. And we had everybody share what their values were. And that's also because a lot of this is value-based. So he brings up in the book talking about like vaccines. Like you have the vacciners and you don't, right? And no matter till he was blue in the face, he couldn't figure out how to have the conversation. But you're really telling someone that they've been wrong in their beliefs their entire life, right? And that's a hit to your ego. So he had to understand where they were coming from. So that when you look at your staff, if you don't know what their values are and you try to change their values in these conversations, and you're not speaking the same language, that's where I think the disconnect happens. So, and I will tell you, make sure that your team shares their values before you share yours, because they will change them based on what you say.
Yep.
And when you start honoring, like I'll share it like with my husband, like his are adventure, but like, let me not get too close to the edge of the cliff adventure. Okay. His is security. And another one was his was joy. Mine was risk, like let me jump off this cliff. I'll build the airplane before I hit the ground, or jump out, whatever. Mine is personal freedom. So like come and go as I want, and joy. So what I realized was in our conversations that we were having, his big security, right? He's never going to leave his job. He's going to complain about it. But that's his value of security, which allows me to have the personal freedom and take the risks that I take in business. So when I stopped combating him, and honoring the value in your team and your staff is when you can actually have real conversations.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's similar to the thought process that I try to maintain with my team is like, if I'm ever going to talk to them about it, have a tough conversation with them about anything that has gone wrong or correct or coach them or anything like that. I always want to try to differentiate, similar to what you're saying, like values and worth. Like, we talk about like self-worth a lot in our practice. It seems kind of like, fluffy language, but I always want to maintain like, hey, your worth as a human being, as somebody, as a provider or as a employee or a team member at our office doesn't change at all. Like what we're talking about is your effort and your actions. And that's what we're addressing. We're not addressing the fundamental things. So you may be wrong with the way that you've acted, and we can correct those things and improve those things. But just know that doesn't change who you are in your identity. That doesn't, I'm not, because so often I think, especially nowadays, we view any sort of correction as an assault on our identity and an assault on our self-worth. And so I'm pretty explicit at the beginning of those conversations, like, hey, this is what I believe about you. This is who you are. This is your worth. That doesn't change regardless. But these are the things that we need to address. These are the things that we need to improve upon. And one of the things that's helped us a ton with that is I'm a junkie on personality assessments. So we use 2 different personality assessments. One is the Working Genius, which is super helpful to kind of know what each type of person works, how they work. Mm-hmm. And the other one is called the Enneagram. The Enneagram is basically there's 9 different types. And the reason I love the Enneagram is it kind of tells, it gives each type is based upon kind of what they value or it has a virtue and a vice associated with each personality type. So you can tell like what it's in a way like indirectly what you're talking about, Brianna, of like what do they value, and what are you trying to? It's one of the only personality assessments that actually shows like what is a mature number 1. There's 1 through 9. What does a mature number 1 look like? And then if we know that, and we know this person, this team, this employee is number 1, then we kind of have a vision for what the type of person we want them to become. And so, I mean, I know it probably is a little bit overdoing it, as being their boss at a optometry practice, but I thoroughly believe like, hey, I'm here not just to help you be awesome professionally, but I want to help you grow as a person to become the person that are designed to be or created to be, and for you to help me maintain that vision of what that type of person is. So that's what we love the Enneagram, but it's the same type of thing of assigning value, understanding that person, how they, their core inner workings, knowing that like help them protect that, but then also grow and mature in their personality and in the work that they're doing. Yeah,
there's another one that people are common with too is called the DISC. It's an easier one probably to get started on than the Enneagram, because that one too like really gets deep really fast. So if you want like a really basic one to start, is you can take a DISC profile. I'm a recovering D.
What does that mean?
I didn't see that at all.
But I think it's just acknowledging too, like who you are, what you want to work on. And Kyle, we do something similar in my office too, where it's like, if you're here for 2 months or if you're here for 20 years, I want you to advance as a human being. You can look at this as a job, but that's not really how you should look at any job. So yeah. I send a lot of get better cards, not get better because you're sick, get better at life.
Get better. Get better at life. Yeah. Well, it's we brought up values. One of my biggest drivers is helping people achieve their potential. right? I get a lot of satisfaction of seeing others' success and knowing that, I helped them somewhere along the way, not because I want the credit for it. I get satisfaction out of it. And so I tell my team that I'm going to push and push and push because I can see more in you than you can see in yourself. And we'll talk about it. Quite frankly, the only time to get scared in my office is when I stop pushing you, because that means you've hit where I think you can go. Right. And that hasn't happened yet, but expect it to be pushed. And then we use DISC too, because we're not as nerdy as Kyle, and my brain can't handle 9. I can handle 4. But
what are you, Kyle, on the Enneagram?
I'm a 5.
Do you know what you are?
Yeah, I'm
Is that
a 5.
the one where it's like ENTJ, that it gives you those
No,
things?
it's 1 through 9. A 5 is a thinker, an investigator. So we tend to be like hoarders of information, and like we're really good at investigating, thinking through things, but we like to keep that for ourselves. So my vice is like greed in the sense of like I'm greedy about my information. I'm greedy about like time and energy.
Well, not anymore. Not what you're doing
not
now.
Anymore. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's growth for me. Like that's why I'm pushing towards the virtue of generosity. So that's how I grow as a 5, is to be generous. Nice. Yeah, 1 through 9. I love the Enneagram. It's super. Like you said, it gets pretty deep pretty quickly. So you can often get lost in it. But it's been helpful.
I love those things.
Yeah, you've done really good. You're my Kyle, I need to work through something phone call. Brown is like, you got to hear this story phone call. Yeah. Yeah, learning each other. And I think the hardest part of any of those profiles is learning yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, the D's and D's are very dominant. I think they hear that and they go, yeah, I know. Right. But everybody else it's a little bit of an awakening and a self-reflection. And, am I really this way? Does the world really see me as this way? Because sometimes our own views of ourselves isn't how we come across, right? Or how the world sees us. Not that any one way is good, bad, or otherwise. They're different. They're unique. But when we learn to embrace them all, it makes it better. One of my favorite quotes from the book was he talks about negotiation, and I'm a paraphrase, but it's negotiation within conversation isn't about asserting dominance, but it's about reaching a mutual understanding and a mutual beneficial outcome for both. And I don't think I appreciated that until I married someone who was politically completely opposite of me, right? Because it's easy to not like somebody when you don't have to live with them, right? When you chose to spend the rest of your life with them, you got to listen a little bit more.
Damn, opposites really attracting.
Yeah. But it's kind of neat because there's a lot of perspectives that I never had before. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of walls that I thought were black and white, and there's a lot of color. I mean, there's very few black and whites that I'm learning. And a lot of it is the history and how you come up and your environment and the individuals you work with, your place of work, where your money comes from. I mean, we're in private practice. We're basically selling ourselves. My wife's a public school teacher. And so her money comes from a different source, and she's working with a different group of the population than I am. So I think it's pretty neat when you take that time to not defend, right? I'm not saying everything she thinks is right. And, certainly she's learning how to be wrong when she talks to me, but just kidding.
They reread chapters 7 and 8.
She actually listens to your podcast, Eric,
no,
so
she's
she
not
might hear that.
Oh, she'll laugh. No, we've learned to laugh with each other, but, and I mean, look, election years are the best because the memes we can send back and forth on Instagram are amazing, right? By the way, both of our Instagram feeds are very different.
Yeah.
Like we see completely different things. Our inputs are vastly different. And so being able to share those is kind of eye-opening. And ultimately my kids benefit because they see it all and just get hopefully the most unbiased view of the world. But it is pretty eye-opening when you see that there's a different perspective and you pull some of that stuff and go, okay, well, I can change. I can adjust and expand my viewpoints, my perspectives. And just, it makes life that much more flavorful.
He said
I
something
got a
in there
question
where
for you.
he. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask you a question about the last couple chapters about identity were uncomfortable at times, difficult, right? I think those are tough. Like I said before, is I think a lot of our culture really is we put a lot of emphasis, for better or for worse, on identity. Okay. But I thought it was super helpful to walk through those couple chapters, but how I was thinking about it in terms of our profession, like I kind of pulled some insights out of there, and I was just thinking about as Aaron and I have, and I know you are as well, Brianna, talking to other optometrists, and one of my main arguments for how to or why we are kind of stuck on our own ways sometimes, and it's very difficult to change our habits, to change how we're doing things, is because of our mindset. I really do. Chris Wolf and I run every Tuesday morning, and I think every time we talk about how much it's a mindset issue with most ODs in terms of making the improvements, adopting more the medical mindset. And just making specific growths and seeing more, having more of an infinite mindset of the profession and abundance and those sorts of things. But my mind went to how much do you think the negative or the stereotype of just the optometrist really affects how optometrists work day in and day out in their practices? Because one of the I can go back to try to find it, but one of the studies that they were doing, they're basically showing that, what was it? Basically, perceived
women are bad
stereotypes.
at math, or
Yeah, exactly. Women, this perceived stereotype of women that are bad at math was basically affecting their scores. They proved that stereotype was affecting their scores. And when they were able to control for that and remove that stereotype, or basically what they did is they did a study where they had them take standardized tests, and then they did the same test, but then a different group, I think they said, hey, this is not going to be scored at all, or this isn't going to be graded. And basically, because they removed the potential for that negative stereotype, they did better. And so when I listen to that, I was thinking, how much do you think that affects us in our profession? And that's question number one. And two is, then how do we then communicate better? As leaders in the profession, how do we better reach our colleagues to help them grow, to move past that just an optometrist, or this is the way I'm trained, or even get over and not be influenced by the patient that comes in and says, well, I need to see an ophthalmologist. You know what I mean? So how do we get past that?
I think that there's certainly I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but a perception that, we're not X, right? We want to be seen as X. We're not. And whether it's, a real doctor or, I want to be in surgery. And and I've seen colleagues say, well, so you don't do eye surgery. And they immediately jump to the defense. Well, I do, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not my role, right? And being okay with being who you're not. One of my best friends is a shooting instructor, and I went to a class with him, and there happened to be a cardiac surgeon, a hand surgeon, a nurse, and me. Right. And so everybody got poked fun of, and I was the not a real doctor, right? The hand surgeon and the cardiac surgeon. And what we found, none of us cared, right? It was just fun when you're a bunch of dudes, you just all make fun of each other. That's how we show love. And, but it's, everybody had a place in that role. And when it got into, we were shooting pistols, and when it got into somebody not being able to target well, I could explain all the visual concepts behind it and help to improve it, right? We got into working out and heart rate. The cardiac surgeon was able to jump in and talk about trying to control and just physiologically what happened. And so everybody has something to contribute, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think we start doing a whole lot better when we realize that when we recognize what we contribute to society as opposed to what we don't contribute. Because if I was a surgeon, I couldn't do all the really cool things that I'm doing because I'd be in a room doing surgery all day long. Right. But I like doing all the really cool things that I'm doing. And this made me think of another book. I'm a huge fan of John Acuff, and I was Father of the Year this summer because I bought a book called Your New Playlist, and I made my kids all do book club. So they had assigned chapters they had to read, and then we sat down and we talked about it. It was actually written by John Acuff's daughters. So it's the teenage version of soundtracks. But they talk about a study in here where they had people, college kids, make sentences using a list of words. And one of the list of words was just random words. The other one were words related to old people. So bald, Florida, sorry, Brianna, wrinkles, right? They just put in a bunch of words. And then they said, okay, now we're going to, move you down the hall to another room to continue the study. And the real study was how fast they walked from one room to the other. And everybody who had done all the words using the old people words walked slower, because they had just had that in their mindset. So I think a lot of what our identity, Kyle, is just what we consistently are telling ourselves. So as leaders in the industry, we don't need to have a giant parade to talk about how amazing we are, but I think we need to continually reinforce that being a primary care optometrist is cool. I don't have to be an expert in everything. Just being primary care kicks ass, right? And we have a good life, and patients enjoy what we do. We can make people happy in 30 minutes, right? It's pretty cool deal. And then reinforcing that, and hopefully helping our colleagues when they complain, to rephrase their individual little soundtracks to sound better and tell themselves better. Just be a better communicator to themselves.
Yeah, the part of the book too, Kyle, to piggyback on that, was he called it identity threat. So where I hear it too, and I'm sure all of you guys do, because we're in these business conversations a lot, where they're like, God, every optometrist is bad at business. And then I purely go on the defense where I'm like, hey, we're not all bad at business, because we are really a sure bet at the bank. Did you know that? So we don't know everything. That's also where we need help. So he says it where you go into a conversation and he says, hey, you didn't go to law school, so you wouldn't understand. So we get those statements a lot in our industry. So it's also, I think, bringing the industry together as a whole, how we talk to one another, from sales reps to staff, to us as doctors, to opticians, to ophthalmologists, right? What we all do is play that part. So how are you showing up? We can learn all these things. I got into med school. I could have gone to med school. I didn't want to go to med school, right? So I think that there's so much room for growth, because we come from it as an abundant mindset versus that scarcity mindset. And that's also taught from our industry. Like, you're going to save yourself to wealth. You're going to rebate yourself to wealth. You're going to do all these things. Like, no, that's not, like, I made somebody through our platform $100,000 in 7 months, and he was worried that he missed on a $2,000 rebate. And I was like, okay. And he just caught me so off guard on that conversation that I was like, yeah, our values are completely misaligned. So then I just finished the book. I couldn't get that one back on track, because I was just like, I don't know where to take this. But that's what, again, I think is a critical piece to how we communicate, how we talk to one another, what words we're using, what language we're using. But don't take it so to heart. We got to be duck smart and just let shit roll off our backs. Don't let it attack your identity, because that's not your identity.
Yeah. And I also wonder, even trying to use the strategies that he talks about to alleviate some of those threats, how do we, I was just thinking as a lecturer, because Aaron knows this, and I include a slide from Atomic Habits in pretty much every lecture I do, and it talks about how our mindset and our beliefs and our identity, underlies our actions, and then our actions reinforce those beliefs. And it's just a continuous cycle of how we need both. Like, we often think so much about our actions as being what drives our behavior, but really we got to have identity and beliefs as strong as our actions, and they reinforce each other. So I talk about that all the time, but as I was reading this book, that section, I was like, well, how do I better communicate that? Because I can't just, obviously I'm step one of making that aware to them. Hey, this is a mindset issue. But then how do we use, I think 193 is like how to talk about who we are. So step one is drawing out multiple identities. Step two is put everyone on equal footing. 3 is create new groups by building on existing identities. I was just trying to brainstorm ways of like, do you, in a way, draw out multiple identities? Like, hey, just so you know, when you're in that exam lane, you're a member of the community, just like the surgeon down the street is a member of the community. And almost like create identity correlations or comparisons between you and the patient and you and the other providers, to try to break down those mindsets of like, hey, I can't do this because somebody else can.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that makes sense at all, but that's kind of where I was going in my mind of, how do you apply that to better position in somebody? Because that's kind of was for me, like my first couple of years, I did a residency at a VA, and then I spent time at a referral clinic. And what empowered me so much was being around somebody that had an unbelievably firm identity in what he did, as Bob Vandervoort. And to this day, like, he's retired now, but man, he is the smartest, best optometrist in knowing how to manage all facets of comprehensive care I've ever been around, period. So, and he just had a unbelievable confidence about himself. And it wasn't like he thought he was way better than those that he referred to for surgery or anything. It's just like he knew his role, and he was very sturdy in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it's learning to be comfortable with ourselves. And as much as Simon Sinek doesn't resonate with me, he's a little too warm fuzzy. But it's that it is, understanding like what your purpose is and what drives you. And I think very few of us have done that. School taught us to be very didactic and defensive of our opinions and because you got to defend, why you made the diagnosis or your treatment. And I think that's appropriate, but very few of us ever were sat down and said, write down why you're here, right? Write down what you're doing. Write down why you wanted to be in private practice. Write down why you don't want to be in private practice and you want to work in a retail or in a hospital setting, right? But just acknowledge what it is, because you can't do everything and you can't be everything. And, so own who you are and what you are, and then just be real open to learning about why other people are doing what they're doing. And it's a pretty cool place when you get to the point of not just saying, 1 + 1 = 2 for me, and if 1 + 1 = 3 for you, you're wrong. Well, I'm curious as to find out why 1 + 1 = 3 for you, right? I don't have to agree to it. We're not having a math test. Nobody's doing it, but I'm curious as to why, right? Because I'm sure you can come up with a very good justification that at least opens my eyes. And should I ever come across that, now I have new information I can apply. And so along those terms, when I decided that part of my identity too was always learning, it made saying, I don't know, a positive comment instead of a negative comment. I didn't feel dumb. It just found an opportunity, right? Kyle or Chris and I started comparing KPI notes on what we're tracking, right? And then he asked me a couple of, why are you doing this? I had no good reason. It's an exercise in another number. That was silly, right? But others, he had good questions about, and same thing, vice versa. And so we learned from each other. So that learning identity, I want to grow more, I want to know more, has really not only taught me more, but it helped me be okay saying I don't know.
Well, and that was an oath we took in school.
That was.
If we want to get scientific about it.
Well, shoot, how many times has glaucoma changed in our lifetime?
Oh my God, so many. I think one, too, that we're seeing, too, is just part of the community, right? Is where more and more of us, and I'm seeing it, too, is and I did it, like specialization, right? Where we picked like myopia management or the medical model or dry eye. Like I don't think specialization is the answer. Remember, you're servicing a community. So that's probably another one for another podcast.
Is that a slow clap, Kyle? I like that. Yes.
It's just a rinse and repeat model. If you get one down, and it just comes to the knowledge, understanding the knowledge. So when you get a question back from the patient, you know how to respond to him. And you can also say what Aaron said confidently, I don't know. Yeah. So give yourself permission to do that.
Yes.
Hey,
no,
should we end on like a deep question here?
Sure.
Let's do that.
Page 263, we have a series of 36 questions from the Fast Friends procedure. So here's the first 36. Let's just do the first question, okay? So this might take way longer than the next like 5 minutes, but given the choice of anyone in the world, so maybe we should preface this. These were 36 questions that they asked in a study that essentially, and you can add in what I miss out on here, essentially they did a study to show how people connect and align. And these deep questions were ways in which people engaged really quickly in a feeling conversation. And so they found out that initially they wanted to ask like kind of shallow questions first and then work into the deep, but they realized like just asking a deep question right away was actually the best way to quickly connect with somebody, as long as both participants were, reciprocating that vulnerability, or sharing the feelings and sharing. So I told my wife last night that we are going to use these 36 questions at dinner parties for the next couple months, but they're pretty awesome. So number one, we'll do that one, is given the choice of anyone in the world, whom would you want as a dinner guest?
Brianna?
Who would I want as a dinner guest? Damn it, I knew you were going to ask one of these questions. I didn't know which one.
Well, we can go, when's the last time you cried? We could do that one. But
no, let's do it this one. I'll jump on this one.
You go first, Darren.
I'm going to say Cole Hawker. He was the American that just won the 1500 at the Olympics, the gold medal. And so I've got a running background, more of an endurance running than what Cole did. But to do something like what he did, to just, I want to know what went through his mind that last 100 meters, because that is a long, long, long way to go after running 1400, right? And there's nothing more that you want in the world than to just stop. At least that's been my experience. So over a beer, now that he can drink a beer because he's not training, he's got his gold. I want to know what went through his mind, especially with all the nonsense and the ego talking from his competitors ahead of time. Just like walk me through that last 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, that race was unbelievable, because you're right, the ego, the Ingridson or Ingrid,
Yeah.
I forget what, he was like the months before just talking so much trash about how he was going to easily win and blow past everybody. So pretty incredible.
I think he'd be fun.
I would say the answer to my question would be probably, I can't say two, but it would either be like an author, because I just love reading these books. It would probably be either John A. Cuff, which I think he would just be a super fun person to have at a conversation at a dinner party, or Adam Grant. Probably more likely Adam Grant. Adam Grant's one of those guys, oh man, I just thought of another one. Cal Newport. Cal Newport would be great too, but maybe I'll go Adam Grant, because I think Adam Grant I probably have more differences with, in terms of like, he's one of those guys that when he writes a book, I read it. He's read lots of great books, Give and Take, Think Again, a lot of great books, and he's a professor at Penn University. About organizational psychologist. So I think he'd be fascinating to talk to.
Very cool.
Yeah, mine would be, I'm going to go like a different direction. I've been reflecting a lot on just like how you get here as a human. So like would be someone like my great-great-grandmother who I never knew. I don't even know what her name is actually. But it's like, that's really cool to see what generations have gone through. I think that would be super cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah, like an origin story.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That was a good one. And thank you for not asking about crying, Kyle.
Now we need to, do we feel okay not reciprocating, like feeling and sharing our other stories? We feel good about this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Just making sure. All right.
I feel good. No.
Okay.
This was good. No, good book. And definitely, Kyle, you said it right at the beginning. I think this is a go back and reread again to pull out and some of the tidbits that I may have missed or build upon from the last one.
Yeah.
And I'll work on the crying bit.
Next time.
Next time. Just for you.
You didn't cry at your daughter's graduation?
No, I was incredibly proud. The ducks don't turn on.
Get some plugs
It
there.
reminds me of a movie. What movie is it where like the guy can't cry and then he finally it's like The Holiday. Like it's a girl. She can't cry and then like something emotionally hits her and she finally cries and that she's like, there's tears. Like they do work. Yeah. We'll get there.
We'll get there at some point. So, but I do have emotions. So
we know you do.
I know. Awesome. Well, Kyle, Brianna, thank you guys very much, and everyone who joined us right along. We'll put out the next book for book club shortly, and be sure to come up to us at the next time we see you at a conference. Feel free to judge our communication skills, because we'll be self-judging our own as well.
Yep.
Call us out if we get a little cognitively lazy. So, or at least call me out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.